Welcome to What's the Finish, our weekly podcast where we talk to experts and individuals just like you to discuss not only the flavors and finishes of spirits and foods, but also all the flavors life has to offer, along with the magnificent finishes they bring. So join our host, David Afariat, as he asks the question, what's the finish?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of What's the Finish? This is our podcast that talks about the flavors and finishes of spirits and foods, along with the magnificent moments they bring. So today I have a great pleasure in welcoming a very special person we're going to get to know about a bit more, but it's Mike LaPlante, and at the Instagram label of The Average Wine Enthusiast. And we'll just dive right in and kind of share our stories a little bit. Mike, welcome to the show. Thank you for spending your time here with us and on this journey. How would you describe your wine journey, and where has that taken you?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your show, David. It's my pleasure being here. My wine journey is a lot like many other folks that I've come across in those last bunch of years. You realize you have a liking of wine, and it makes you feel a special way, whether it's enjoyed with friends, and of course it's alcohol, so there's a little bit of that effect as well, which it should never be taken too far, but it also enhances the whole thing. So I think a lot of people get into it specifically for those reasons, that that it adds something to any event or a gathering of people, and I was definitely in that boat. But shortly after that, I started, like most people, you follow your budget, and I think a lot of people should follow their budget as far as wine goes. And you realize that this amount of money will buy me this amount of pleasure as far as what I like to drink. And then you realize that you get turned on to something different, and you say, wait a minute, this is way better than that other stuff that's in my budget. How much do I have to spend some more money? Oh, I guess I do. And so you keep upgrading, or you get turned on to something that isn't necessarily an upgrade, but it's more like a lateral journey. That's what we're talking about here, is a wine journey. Sure. And you keep getting turned on to different stuff. And then, of course, there's the old world versus new world stuff, and you realize the differences between those two things altogether. Yeah. And for me now, the wine journey is mostly about trying to find out new things about wine, new varietals, new blends, right, new places, new right, countries that I didn't even know were any good at making wine. Right. And by the way, when I first started my wine journey, Canada was not a great they didn't make very good wine, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Let's talk about that real quick. I mean, so let's place you real quick. So are you in British Columbia, Canada? Where in Canada are you?
I'm in the province of Ontario, in a city called Windsor, which I can actually see across the Detroit River to downtown Detroit. So I'm about as far south in Canada as you can get. Right.
So porous border, but able to easily get from Windsor to Detroit. Both great. I mean, at least I should say Detroit is a great city. I have yet to experience the pleasures of Windsor. And
Come on over. Right. So by the
time we finish this conversation, actually, I'm going to make sure, like I do with many others guests that we've had from countries all over, I will be asking for two restaurant recommendations. One that you really kind of save your pennies for, and the other one that's like where you go, it doesn't have the tablecloth, but is like, and they serve the wine out of a glass, unpretentious, we'll say, just like right. Bottom line. So keep those, noodle on those for a moment. We'll get to those by the time we finish our conversation. But so now that we have you planted in Windsor, and often, between this axis of Windsor and Detroit, I want to just pick up the thread of what you said before. I think it's so important that if you enjoy wine, you by definition are someone who is a lifelong learner, someone who is curious, and someone who learns because the world of wine, A, changes every year, and B, there's so much to it. Even if you find your favorite spots, if you will, then, every year it starts to evolve and change, and you get to be part of that experience. I noticed, for instance, that you have spent a lot of time analyzing, and tell us if that also includes travel with Portugal. Tell us a little bit about that.
Portugal, yeah, we just went. That was our latest trip, and it was probably since I retired just before I left to go to Portugal, we were able to spend an extended amount of time there. 23 days we actually spent there,
Nice.
and it was wine based. I tried to hit all the wine regions. So there's Lisboa, and then there's Porto, and then there's Vinho Verde, and then there's the Douro Valley, and the Dow, and Alentejo. So it was kind of like a circle. And then we headed back over to Lisboa, and there's a little wine region next to Lisbon called Setúbal, and it produces delicious white wines, and they do great things there. And to be honest with you, I drank a heck of a lot of wine in Portugal, and I didn't have one bad bottle other than the bottle that someone left us at their Airbnb, which is common. and it was, let's just put it was rustic. It was lacking something. That's, just the preparation wasn't quite right, or it was in a bottle too long. I have no idea, but. And one thing I can also say about Portugal that struck me was how ingrained it is in the culture, which is the same in Spain and Italy and France. You don't understand it until you see it, and the grapevines that are just everywhere, and how they retail it. Like, they don't retail wine there the way they do here. It's a totally different entity. They don't put it in its own little category. It's like bread and milk and everything else.
Got it. It's like salt and pepper to a meal. It's
Yep.
It's what you would have on the table. Period. Nothing out of the ordinary here. I love that, and it sounds like you got to experience that firsthand and over a lengthy period of time. It's quite a privilege. It's quite a privilege to be able to travel. A, B,
Yes.
to be able to go to these wine regions is to say that part of your learning is I'm going to be vested in the place so that I come back, changed, and I come back with a way to access that fond time of 23 days in Portugal, or in my experience, all the time that I've spent in France.
Sure.
That's pretty amazing. Have you traveled to other wine regions? And if I had to ask you, maybe the question correlates to what are your favorite wine regions and varietals, correlates to like where have you traveled the most repeatedly, gone back to? The reason I went to one particular wine region was because I had a friend who lived there, who coincidentally is our house guest right now. She lived in Santa Rosa, California, and that's in the dead center of Sonoma County. And of course, you go to Napa and Sonoma, and we visited all the wineries that we possibly could fit in there. In fact, my wife and I went there before we were husband and wife, and we got married at a winery there. Hey, wow, that's a commitment. That is anchoring a common shared passion right there into the marriage, right there into the start. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it was one of our favorite wineries. For one, they made amazing wines. Two, the location, it was right on the Dry Creek, which, if you know, the Sonoma Dry Creek Valley is famous for delicious wines, and they're great people, and everything was just said we should get married here. So that's what we did, because I would go there pretty much every year, which coincided with my tech side, because they used to have a conference in San Francisco that I would go visit, and then while I was in San Francisco, we would inevitably visit our friend in Santa Rosa.
Well, that sounds like a truly special place. How could they not make great wine after you bestowed such a deep life cycle memory and event in your lives, in there? It's always going to be, you'll drink it till they stop making it, I'm sure.
Right. But having said that, David, I would have to say that it comes to a point where you want to remove yourself from that for a specific period of time, and then only visit it relatively rarely.
Of course.
Because you feel like, okay, I really understand this place. And for me, drinking any wine should represent the place, not a specific person or anything else. It should be about the place. And I think I've investigated that to the nth degree. And now I really find myself using that as an impetus to branch out and really try to educate myself in terms of other wine regions out there.
Yeah. Well, I think that is actually a great way to look at it, to say that if you are anchored in one particular area, where you go and where you experience more wine and palate flavors and such, you start with that first indelible experience, this where you got married, Dry Creek, and then California, white, whatever, the wine profiles of that particular place, and now are used to compare what a Porto would taste like, or what a Burgundy would taste like, and everyone starts someplace and then uses that to do those first instantaneous comparisons when they're drinking a new wine, is to say, okay, my reference is this. How does it different? And different, can be equally or be even better, but at least I'm starting from some frame, and everyone's frame is a little different because of some memory.
Yeah, that's it. And we should try to, you say better, that should not really be a word that you'd be using too often. It should be different, because, every place is different. Every varietal grows differently. There's a million different winemakers out there. So, and I even have a show called Don't Have a Go-To. It's all about not going back. Right. Because there's many folks that I know that they visit their wine store and they go and they buy the same wine, week after week or whatever, Sure. I say, well, why don't you branch out? Like, but I like this wine, and it's in my price range. And, I freak out because there's so much, to experience instead of sticking to one little thing. And usually those wines are typically production wines, which that's another show I did. I actually did 2 shows on why you should stay away from production wine.
That's right. And we're talking about those who would purchase grapes in bulk to make their styles, and even then, you can have smaller. Let me rephrase that, because I actually have great friends who don't necessarily grow their own grapes, but they contract and they will buy in small quantities from very specific vineyards and blocks within those vineyards to craft some incredible wine. But the point is that it's made on a lower scale, so that the results can be quite creative and amazing. That's one example, and then the other is those actual farmers who touch every grape, who don't buy anything else but grow their own grapes and put it into the bottle. And again, that you can only do so much of that. But it's special when you get a chance to experience those particular wines, those that are handcrafted, whether they're bought or whether they're grown. I'm expanding that a little bit to say that these are really special when they're not done with the scale of the world's demand in mind. Right.
Yeah. When we went to Portugal, there was a place called Casa Santos Limos, and they had 110,000 liter stainless steel vats. They were like skyscrapers.
Olympic pools wow. So a couple of things, Mike. Can you tell us a little bit about how, so if you could tell our audience, what's some advice on how you truly appreciate wine? We've talked about it's like points of comparison and how you want to taste a broad spectrum. When you taste and when you push yourself to taste something new, how do you go about breaking down a wine you're experiencing?
Well, I have to think it's a lot about expectations, right? You either heard about it or you paid X amount of dollars for it. It came from a very specific place. So develop these expectations you have in your head, which you have to eliminate. You have to get rid of these expectations because it will influence the way that you taste wine. And so I like to come into each wine that I've never tasted before with this, like a childlike wonderment, like let's find out what happens here. And as you do this, for years on end, you stick your nose into a glass and you're hoping it's going to be special. And when it is, it's just like, oh, wow. And so you basically almost pigeonhole or compartmentalize what you're smelling, whether it's floral or fruitful or herbaceous or whatever the case may be, and then that gives you your expectation of what it could possibly taste like. When it's really fun is when what you smell has nothing to do with what lands on your palate, and then you're like, wow, I got all kinds of surprises happening here. I'm not sure if that actually answered your question or not, but
I think it does. I think what's interesting is I like what you said about having to eliminate expectations. I've never heard that before, but this idea of, and it's hard. If I'm at a store, if I'm looking at a wine list, and I know the value of the bottle being sold here, You're saying you have to almost acknowledge that, or if you're not necessarily the one, you may be paying for the meal at the end, but you've let someone else pick the wine. You're blind to that. Even if you know the price or you don't, you have to move that out of your head and then come at it cleanly with, okay, well, I'm going to try to remove this expectation that this had better wow me. That's a hard thing to do. But then
if you can practice doing it though.
Sure.
Just like smelling wine, you get good at it after a while.
And then the other aspect is we all feast and start devouring things with our eyes. So you're almost saying, like, if you could remove the expectation of again, if someone, this were a truly blind tasting, would that be the most ultimate way of appreciating wine for you? Because you come at it like, okay, I can either see the color, I can smell, and I can start to, how far do you take that?
Yeah, the blind tastings are fun to me. It's almost like a game. And that's something else that you do, that you've put this wine in that category that when you blind taste it, which I tend not to do, because that's just not an experience that I enjoy having with wine. If you're in a group of people and there's a very specific goal to achieve here, like if you want to, people have this perception in their mind and you want to remove those perceptions, blind tasting is a great way to do that, because then it kind of eliminates everything else, right? So there's that. And the other thing I wanted to mention about expectations is I just recently tasted a Sauvignon Blanc from Sarah Jessica Parker. Is that her name? Yeah. Mm-hmm. She's an actress, and she makes this Sauvignon Blanc out of New Zealand, and it was 22 Canadian dollars. And so there's another example of an expectation you have. Mm-hmm. Typically, when I think of a famous person's name on a wine bottle, it doesn't usually go well. I don't know what the
right.
I don't know what the deal is, but here I spent $22 on a Sauvignon Blanc, and I just had a Stag's Leap Sauvignon Blanc just before this. And when I tasted, so I'm thinking this isn't going to be very good, but that Sauvignon Blanc has stuck with me for this last week. I'm like, I can't stop thinking about it because it was so good.
Wow.
So there's an example of expectations, which is easier to hold on to that expectation because there was a negative connotation that was attached to it, right? So There's that as well.
Interesting. Okay. Well, let's see. I think this has been a great conversation, Mike, and I do want to kind of wrap up here. I've got just like two more questions, and one of those is that restaurant recommendation question we want to come back to. But what would be, as you think about how you're experiencing wines, and do you make any kind of, tell us a little bit about, do you make any kind of distinction about sustainable and organic? And can you think a little bit, if you were captain of the industry here, what the future, how do you think the wine industry will change to be more environmental friendly? Talk a little bit about what your thoughts.
I think the wine industry in general, I kind of keep my ear to the ground as far as these kind of things are concerned, because a lot of these wineries, for them to become sustainable, biodynamic, organic, all those great things that these wineries are moving towards, the people who either own the winery or the winemaker are really conscious of of their actions, so they tout those things. So I know that a lot of people in the wine industry, that's just kind of like, this is where it's going. This is where fine wine production is going. So it maybe not your big guys, they'll probably be slower to get into that. But as far as, mid-range, definitely the Vignerons out there, they're going organic, natural, pesticide-free and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's just a matter of time before we get to a point where there's going to be the wineries, the majority of them are going to be on that path of making whether it's certified organic, which is, I guess there's a just like anything that's certified, the word certified makes you think money. Someone's got to make some money here to get your certification. So I think a lot of wineries out there are heading towards that future for their future business.
Yep, that sounds right. Yep. Okay, so now we've decided to take a trip to the wonderful province of Ontario, and we've left Detroit after some good meals and good experiences there, and we arrive in Windsor. And by the way, if you've got a restaurant recommendation in Detroit, we'll take it too. But what we all decided to go out. Where are you gonna take us?
Well, if you want a fine dining experience with a pretty decent wine list. You're going to go to Take 5 Bistro on Erie Street, and Erie Street is it's Little Italy in here in Windsor. But interestingly enough, it's a steakhouse that serves seafood and steaks and beef dishes. But their wine list is very nice, and the service is kick ass, and I love it. I love it there. Awesome. And then on the other scale, if you're going to go to a place where it's just kind of like mom and pop, you're just popping in. There is, like you say, there's no fine linen on the table or anything, but it too is an Italian restaurant. Well, I shouldn't say Take 5 Bistro is not an Italian restaurant. It's in an Italian district. Mm-hmm. Piccolo's is not in Little Italy, but it is an Italian restaurant, and that would be my other recommendation is Piccolo's, which I got to talk to those people. Their wine list has some room for improvement. Let's just put it that way.
You're just the guy to help be their guide.
Yes, I find that I don't know what it's like where you live, but there's so many restaurants that their food game is way up here, but their wine game is down here, and it's like they're leaving money on the table. If you ask me, like someone who's willing to pay whatever hundreds of dollars for a meal, they're going to spend a good chunk of money on a bottle of wine if you just offer it to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's very frustrating for me.
Okay, well, it sounds like something we can hold you accountable to. When we go to Piccolo's, we're going to expect the wine list to be better. To be better and to be signed by Mike LaPlante. Mike, this has been truly a gift. Thank you for your time. Thanks for sharing your experience in this new journey from retirement into the world of wine with us. Those who want to spend more time with Mike can visit him on YouTube, where his channel is The Average Wine Enthusiast. Love the name, very approachable. And you can also find him on Instagram at the same handle, The Average Wine Enthusiast, with an underscore in between each of those words. Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure, David. Hopefully we can chat again, or maybe I'll see you here in Windsor.